Okay. Okay. I want to get started. So come on in, everybody there's still some chairs around a little bit. I want to welcome everybody to this forum on the high school. My name is John Ports. I'm the chair of the school committee. I'm also a member of the school building committee. So thank you for coming. It's a great opportunity for you to hear about what's planning here in terms of the high school, but an opportunity also for you to provide input on the direction that this process goes. There's really two parts to this evening. The first part is where the superintendent will talk about the education plan for the new high school, which is a continuation of what we have now, but going off in some new directions as well. So she will talk about that. And then we have the architect, Scott Dunlap, over here from AI3, who will then present a more detailed kind of set of slides about the current planning for the high school. We also have Tim Bonfatti, who is from the Compass Project Management. Not the other ones. Compass Project Management, they are the owner's project manager for the high school project. Let me just say, by way of a very quick background, we started a planning process 3 to 4 years ago, looking at all the school buildings in Watertown, and identified a lot of changes and a lot of improvements that we wanted to try to achieve. That resulted, with the support of the town council and the support of the town manager, the creation of a school building committee that was formed in March of 2018, so almost 2 years ago. And that building committee has been meeting quite a bit since then. And I want to be clear also, you may hear about other projects going on in town, because we're doing a lot of work on the elementary buildings, the 3 elementary schools. 2 of them, the Hosmer and the Cunniff, are actually going to be replaced. And that process will start this summer. So that's something we're doing, the town is doing with its own resources, with some very good planning from the town manager and from the town council, is able to do that. So those projects will be happening, and you'll hear more about it, and you'll see more about that in the coming months. At the same time, we also applied to the state to become part of a process there where the Massachusetts School Building Authority works with individual communities on major school building projects. And so we were accepted into that process for the high school. So the high school is kind of on a different track than the elementaries, because the elementaries we're doing on our own, but the high school, we will be cost sharing with the state. They're going to help us pay for that, which is very important. But that also we have processes and steps that we have to do to comply with their approach to it, which is a good thing in the long run. And so right now we're in what they call Module 3, which is the feasibility study. And the two of the major pieces are the education plan and then the development of options for a high school building. And that's what we're going to hear about tonight. This is the second forum. We will have other forums, probably another one in 2 or 3 months. So there'll be opportunities to give more input. I will say there's a sign-up sheet going around someplace. If you want to put your email on that, we will make sure you get on a list so you hear about the forums that are coming up. So with that kind of introduction, let me turn it over first to Dr. Galston, the superintendent, to talk about the education plan.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Obviously, I think we've grown out of our space, and we'll have to consider bigger options in the future. Rebuilding a high school, obviously, is a very important undertaking for a town, and it does garner a lot of interest. So, moving forward, we'll rethink maybe if we need to move into the auditorium, but thank you for, making do with all the seats, and certainly thank you for being here, because this is a very important event for our community. So I just so once again, I'm Dr. Galston, I'm the superintendent of schools. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you will have children that will attend the new high school if it opens around 2025, 2026? Fabulous. And how many of you went to the high school? Oh, good. There you go. Some people are double duty on that one. So you will have some familiarity, of those of you who went to the high school, in terms of thinking about what it is that we would like to maybe differently than when you might have been at the high school. And those of you, the children, certainly are probably pretty excited or interested in what we're going to provide for our students in our new high school. So that's what I'm going to provide you with a little bit of information around that. So Chairman Ports described pretty nicely about Watertown Building for the Future. I just put up here, as you know, or if you didn't know before this evening, we are well underway in our elementary school projects. And these are some renderings of what our new buildings would look like at the Hosmer and the Cuniff, and then the Lowell addition as well. And tonight we're talking about Watertown High School. So I want to just share with you a little bit about our Educational Working Group, otherwise known as EWG. So when you see that up there, that stands for the Educational Working Group. We gathered approximately 50 people over 3 meetings back in November and December. And during that time, we called it educational visioning. And we gathered the people. They were students, teachers, administrators, parents, community members, to really discuss deeply what it is that we wanted to offer in our new high school for our students. So I just want to say, before we even get started, you know, you might be wondering, what about safety? Safety is a given. Like, we don't need to put safety as a priority, because safety is the priority. You know, ubiquitous technology. We know that in a new institution, ubiquitous technology is important. Every student, every teacher should have access easy to technology. So that's one of the things that we're not necessarily going to talk about. You know, community resource. We know that this building will be used by the community as well as the schools. So there's certain things I'm not going to go too into detail, but do know that yes, safety is important, and yes, we will have excellent technology in our buildings. But that group really thought about, you know, now we have an opportunity. We're poised at the right moment in time to build a building that will provide an environment for our students that really is forward-thinking and progressive in terms of how education will be delivered in the next century, not just this century, but the next one as well. Might be a new building, but let's get ready for that reality. So the group came together and we thought about what might be the guiding principles when we create our educational plan. So what an educational plan is for the MSBA is it's kind of like a roadmap that talks about what it is we want to see within our building, so that then when the architect designs our building, he has direction as to what it is that the community is looking for within their buildings. So this is a really important process. And I would also say a couple of other we don't need to necessarily speak too much about is we will always have very robust and extensive special education programming within our buildings. We will always make sure that we're taking care of the needs of all of our students. We're not reducing our programming, but we are going to talk a little bit about things that we would like to add to our school. So the team put together these guiding principles, and so I'm just going to go through them. The first one is real world living. This came out pretty clearly within that group about this building has to make connections to this century. You know, I don't even want to refer to it as the 21st century, it's this century. We need to make sure that we're engaging our students in thinking and doing for the demands of their lives in the future. We want to make sure that we have integrated in transdisciplinary learning. So, you know, if you think about the high school as it is right now, it's very departmentalized. And the building in and of itself doesn't allow for much interdisciplinary learning. But we know, we've all learned, when we can make sense of things, when we see those cross-discipline connections, the learning is deeper. So our new building needs to facilitate that interdisciplinary approach to teaching and learning. STEAM, for those of you who don't know what that stands for, that's science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. So when we think about that integrated approach, we want to make sure that we're making those connections across the different disciplines. We want a building that really fosters this growth mindset. A building doesn't do that. It's the people within the building. But we want to make sure that the building makes people feel really good about their learning and that everyone has the potential to learn. And then last but not least, in that real world living is local and global connections. So we want to make sure that students understand where they come from, but we also want to make sure that they understand their place in the world. And the building will be able to help us do that. The second guiding principle is inclusivity. So this again is part of our core value and our mission as a school district is making sure that we are very inclusive. We want to make sure that we personalize our learning and we make connections, deep connections for students. Belonging and ownership, we want to make sure that our students walk through the door and feel that they belong to this school and this community. So a building can help foster that. Self-expression, we want to see, and we'll show you some pictures in a minute, you know, students' self-expression visible throughout the building. So, you know, all day long you are seeing and you're experiencing what the students are experiencing in their classrooms, in their art classrooms, in their performance classrooms, math, science, whatever. We want to make sure people see the learning. Relationship building. So we want a building that makes sure that we foster good, strong relationships. Right now, when we did the visioning session and when you talk to students actually, they often feel very disconnected, that they don't necessarily build those easy relationships because sometimes their favorite teacher might be across the hall, down the road, and they're not really easily accessible. So we want to make sure our building fosters building relationships. Autonomy, community, and synergy. So the other thing about, I think we can all agree that this building has some room to grow, but the synergy, the interconnectedness of the building just is lacking. No offense to those who went to Watertown High School, and you might not have noticed this, but we don't build upon the programs within the building. So you feel very isolated either in your disciplines or in your classes or whatever it might be, and we don't feel that synergy between the various programs. You could go probably all day long and not even know that we have a carpentry class. It's tucked away down in the basement, or the robotics lab, which is in the corner, back in the back corner. I think there's probably people that don't even know we have these things because they're not part of the life of the school. So that's something that we want to do as well. Safety and warmth, we talked about safety, but we want warmth. Warmth is this idea, it's not like, okay, I'm pretty warm right now, but you want to feel that the building and the people within the building are there to protect you and to make you feel good about yourself. So a building can do that. And I know there's other people that want to talk, but we did some visiting. So this team that was the educational working group went to visit Plymouth South. We went to the Southwest Middle School, and I also visited Situate. And one of the things when you walk into a new building, it smells good, it feels good, it's quiet. You feel like you want to be there to learn. So we want to make sure that our buildings have that feeling as well. School as community resource is the third guiding principle. This idea of 24-hour Watertown, we don't have the student who came up with this, but this was driven by a student. She's a sophomore currently at the high school, who really designed this idea that, it's 24 hours. You come here not just when the bells ring and when the bell rings again to go home. You are here all the time. You want to be here because the building makes you feel good about being here and the people in it do as well. The center of the community, we want to make sure that this building that we're building right now becomes that center of community. Whether it is people using the building or whether it's us as a community, a school community, we want to make sure that we get that feeling from the building. And again, the synergy of communities, that this is a place where various communities can come together. And then cultural connectivity. We are a very multicultural community. I see many faces here that were yesterday at the Martin Luther King Jr. Unity Breakfast. That's just an example of all the various community organizations within the town that supports this idea of really being the best citizens that we can be. And we want to make sure that we recognize that through cultural connectivity within our schools. And we want to appreciate and celebrate everybody who's part of our community. So the fourth guiding principle is connections. We want that small school feel. That's one of the best things about Watertown High School, but we want to make sure that we have global perspectives. So you don't need to have a very big building or a big community. This is a perfect place. I don't need to tell you that. The smallness of Watertown and the robustness of what we offer is what makes us strong, but we want to make sure that our students are really experiencing that global perspective. And then the indoor-outdoor learning is really important. This is, I'm going to go to the next slide. This was the #1 design feature that people identified in that visioning session. I think maybe it comes from 100 years, 90 years of being in a building that doesn't have very much outdoor space. You don't really have a chance to be part of the outdoors while you're in your school. So we want to make sure that our building provides opportunities that are both indoors and outdoors. So when we talk about sites, that's something that we certainly want to be maximizing, and so we have the opportunity for indoor and outdoor. And then interpersonal connections, so really being able to facilitate those relationships, as we talked about earlier. And then intercultural, which again is a little bit of a repeat from #3. And then last but not least, as a guiding principle, is adaptability and evolution. So we want to make sure that we are building a building that's adaptable to the future. We talk about the fact that we don't even know what the jobs are going to be for our students that are in our schools today. Things are very different for our workers in the future. So it's hard to predict, but we have to really work hard at making sure that we are providing a building that's adaptable and flexible for their future, not our past. So that's pretty much the overview of what that working group came up with for the educational vision for our schools. I'm not going to go over all 26 of these. So these are design patterns that we'd like to see within our new school. Again, there's a lot, I don't want to go through all of them, but a couple of interesting things that came out of this was a student-run cafe. I love this idea of, students, it's not, you don't just come to school, you own part of the school, and part of that might be a student-run cafe. But just making sure that throughout the building, we are facilitating this idea of 21st century design and learning. Okay, so I'm gonna go through some pictures. If you were here for the last forum, Scott actually showed you a few of these, but I wanna kind of walk you through what these might look like in a new school. Okay, everybody ready? Okay, so the first one is we wanna make sure that our school is an educational habitat for all of our students. So we need to make sure that we're celebrating and making sure that everybody feels valued in what they can offer our schools. So we know that our high school students are confident, recognized, and valued. So we want to make sure that our school reflects that. We want to be a school, not just the community within the school, but the building as well, that really exudes confidence and that you can recognize it. I'm always amazed. We have, or I digress again. We're in the process of hiring a new high school principal, and people came in today to get ready for their interviews, and we're sitting there, and I'm looking, I'm like, did you notice the high school over there? And I think you could drive by the high school and you might not even know that it's the high school. So we want to make sure that that building reflects our pride and that the value that we have as our community. So we have as our mission that we prepare our students for life. So this picture actually is office spaces in a lot of the companies that are out there today. There's a space here from Sasaki and Watertown, Millipore, and Mimecast. So, one of the things that we do is we go out and we actually look at the future in terms of what students might be doing. So these are the spaces that they're going to be entering in terms of the workforce. Doesn't look like my space, but I would like to be working there. In that environment. I like working here, but in that kind of environment. So the other thing is we want to make sure that our experience starts right at the beginning of that campus. So once again, making that statement of who are we as a high school community. This is not necessarily what the high school entrance is going to look like, but imagine that this is the kind of entrance that we would have. Again, warm and welcoming entry experience. When you walk in, you feel like you want to be in the building. You feel that you're entering into something that's very special. This is our school. We talked about this before. We want to make sure that we have multiple areas where we can display student work and show what our students are doing. Designing spaces for students from the very beginning. So the minute you enter, you just feel like this is a space for school. A backdrop for creative expression. Again, wanting to make sure that we are always demonstrating and showing what it is that our students are doing. Expression of identity and personalization. So I'm just looking at this picture, and I don't know if you can notice, but on one side are all various flags, probably of the students who are in the building. But you feel like this is my building, and this was made for me, and I feel like I want to be part of it. Watertown's history and culture, so this came up as well as a design pattern. So although we are very forward-thinking, we always have to pay homage to the past. So our buildings have to make sure that, or our future building has to make sure that it recognizes where we came from as well. So collaboration, creativity, and problem solving. These are, again, I hate to use the word 21st century learning skills, but these are the skills of this century for our students, as opposed to maybe even 20, 30, 40 years ago, where it was a lot of taking in information. We want our students actually not just to take in the information because they can get it everywhere, but they need to collaborate with their peers, they need to be creative, and to be able to solve problems. And this comes straight from what people are looking for in their future workforce. A vibrant learning community, again, you want to feel like you're part of something really exciting. Places where we can have independent study, and then a student-focused media center. So, we think of our library, this is what a media center is, the library of the past, but it is a place, it's not just for getting out books or, checking out media, it's really a place for students to gather and work together and collaborate. So within our building, we identified that we want to have strategically located small, like, innovation labs. So this idea that it's a row, like you have a long row of classrooms on either side of your hallways, that's not what we're thinking about. We're thinking about along, not even a row, but along the way, you've got various sizes and spaces for student learning. So you might have a larger classroom, and you might have a smaller innovation lab, or you might have a small group instruction space. We want to make sure that we're very flexible about where our students are learning. Collaborative classrooms. So classrooms not in the future, today, should look a little bit more like this and a little bit less like they used to, which is down in this little corner right here, which is a picture right from Watertown High School. So when you think about how students learn, and even they learned this way 30, 40 years ago, if you think about it, it's giving them opportunities to work together and to take their learning and make it very practical and authentic. And then within our larger classroom spaces, we might have smaller adjacent breakout spaces where students can work in small groups. And then I thought I'd make sure that one of the design patterns and one of the priorities is making sure that we have great spaces for our teachers to collaborate. So again, one of the things that we have in our high school right now is teachers spend a lot of their time in their classrooms when they're not teaching. And that isn't exactly how you get people to collaborate and learn from each other and work together. So we would create excellent teacher spaces within our new building for teacher collaboration as well. So one area that I wanted to talk about that's new for our new high school is really expanding upon the idea of being a comprehensive high school and preparing students for their various pathways in life after school. So one of the things that we've done is we've looked at opportunities not to just provide career pathways based upon an interest, but also to provide programs within our schools that get students ready for life after high school. So one of the things that we're doing is, and have already done, is applying for what the state calls Chapter 74 programming, which is a very intense program that is really designed to help students move out of the high school and either right into work or be very prepared for their next step in college. So we've applied for 2 programs from the state. One of them is engineering technology, and the other one is medical assisting. And these 2 programs were decided based upon the demand within our local community for future jobs, et cetera. So these are the 2 programs that we've applied for, and we have heard back from the state that they would like to, they've approved our applications for those programs. So that is something that we will incorporate within our building. And one of the things about this is it's not, again, I just described the fact that carpentry is down in the basement. These spaces for these programs are right in the middle of everything, so that it's not like you're just in a separate program, but it's really part of the life of the school. And it isn't just, you don't have to just sign up for those programs, but anybody can take advantage of the opportunities that these will afford our students. So again, the idea of robotics and engineering as a program within our school, and having a robotics lab. We have one right now, again, it's down the corner, and it doesn't look like this. So ideally, we'll end up with a space that really promotes the idea of robotics. Medical assisting, again, we did a survey of students, and this actually, there were students right now in the high school who were like, sign me up, I would love to do this program, so that they have the skills after graduation to even move right into a career or move on into college with some skills that other people might not have. Radio and TV broadcasting wouldn't be one of those intensive programs, but we offer it now and we will continue to offer it in the future. So again, a career pathway for our students. And the other one that we're exploring, not necessarily as a Chapter 74 program, but something that we would like to, we have early childhood education programming in our high school, but we actually want to have a lab classroom for our students to actually learn with students here in our school. So this is an example from Plymouth South of their early childhood lab classroom. And I just want to point out, when you have a pathway such as engineering technology, you're not just learning engineering. You're here in our high school learning from all of the various experiences that we have. You're taking classes with everybody. Everybody's taking the same classes, the same expectations, but you're going a little bit further with your program. So this is just kind of a basic, broad overview of our thoughts of our educational program. And in terms of what happens next, so that's a picture of all of our coordinators who are working together, writing our educational program, really describing their programs and what it is that they want to see. And once that's complete, we'll submit that to the state in February. So that's an update on our educational program. And at this point, before we hand it over to the architects, I am more than happy to answer any questions, or if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, this is a great time to do it. But after the presentation, we'll also be available to answer questions as well. Yes?
What
So Minuteman is a full vocational technical high school, and we are not members of, we've never have been. We send students on a tuition basis, so it's non-resident tuition, which we've done for 40 or 50 years. So this wouldn't change that in any way, shape, or form. And it's interesting, again, because we surveyed our students now about would they be interested in these programs, and the ones that are here, not there, are the ones that were very interested in doing this. So I don't imagine, our goal is not to have all of the vocational programs here, it's just to have a few so that some of our students would be able to take advantage of them here. But our goal is not, I should say, the goal is always to provide students with opportunities to explore the careers that they would like. Yes, Kate.
Would you, the engineering courses are
Yep.
and I wanted to ask, would that also incorporate a coding class, like a Python or a Java course, or something like that, so they could get that before college?
So it might not, I mean, I would imagine we will have a computer science course. We're looking at offering that almost so that any child could take the computer science course, whether you're in a program or not, but it could do cross credits, meaning if you take the computer science class, the programming class, it could count towards this program or vice versa. But computer science isn't tied to just one program. It would be something that we offer to all of our students.
So currently, or is it?
We do. We have intro to computer science, and then we have AP computer science. But we're working on providing opportunities. Actually, we're looking at a K-12 curriculum so that our students are starting in elementary all the way through with computer science. Yes?
How many students are you planning for?
So we have an enrollment projection from the MSBA of 720 students. So that's what we're building for. Currently, we have 684 students, but we are building for 720.
With plans to expand from there?
So again, the guidelines from the MSBA are, they will meet us at a 720 student high school. And I'm sure that the architect could speak more about that, but oftentimes when you design your building, you design it with the idea, if we ever have to add something on, can we do that easily? So that would be something that we would be looking at. But we will build to 720. But one of the things that, when we talk about the educational program, and chime in anytime you want, Scott, he and I and the high school principal and various other people have been thinking about a space summary in terms of like how many classrooms do you need, and you know, in each of the programs, and how many for the Chapter 74 programs, and how many special education classrooms. And one of the things that Watertown is very committed to, and I think you know, and if you don't know this, is maintaining really small class sizes. So we are right now, I think our average class size at the high school across all of them is about 18. The MSBA expects about 24 in terms of capacity. So we'll be working really hard to make sure that we're able to maintain those smaller class sizes, which then would mean a few more classrooms, which then hopefully, if we were to have a burst or a growth in enrollment, we'd be able to take that into our existing building. Ideally, we wouldn't be adding an addition, you know, in the next 10 years. We would be building to be able to handle that if we had to. Yes?
I have two questions. I applaud the medical assisting staff. I think that's a great path and opportunity with big growth in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a question about whether it will have a clinical connection so that they can actually get real training.
Yes.
And the liability to Watertown related to that. That's part of question number one. And the second question relates to how are we preparing, or what programs do you have in sight to prepare children for the SATs, the ACTs, and really start to enhance the college opportunities for kids in Watertown?
So in terms of the first one, I wish that we have a career and technical education coordinator who would have the exact answer. Clinical experience, I'm not envisioning with this program would be like directly working with patients, but they would be working, you know, they would do internships or have opportunities like with Mount Auburn Hospital, which is one of our partners, to get some of that more hands-on experience. But that's what a Chapter 74 program does for you, is it really gives you more of the internship, hands-on learning. So if you notice, there's even like a simulation lab that we'll have within our building that will help people to not necessarily work on people, but give them the skills to be ready for that. And then the second part of your question, so you know, throughout our curriculum, we embed the skills that students need to be successful on, you know, standardized assessments such as SATs and ACTs. We don't stop academic learning to teach skills about test taking, but we do make sure that throughout our curriculum, we're preparing our students for the rigor of those tests. We do very well in our SATs in terms of, comparison to state averages. We always outperform, which is great. But one of the things that we did do is, for those of you who have had children and, I don't know, whatever, the PSATs are a very important part of that. So students take the practice SATs, and we, 2 years ago, instituted in our school district that every sophomore takes the PSATs and every junior takes the PSATs. That's part of our school program. And the idea behind that is start when you're a sophomore so you know what to expect, which helps students know what it is that they need to prepare for. We have an excellent guidance counseling program, and we work with our students from freshman year all the way through senior year, helping them to prepare for college. We just had our college night last week. I don't know if anybody attended, but it was fantastic to help students get ready. Yep.
Sorry, just follow up. So is there thought to expand supporting the students more than just, so you do the curriculum, but
Mhm.
the successful programs help the child go from, I have the PSAT, I'm learning in my curriculum, to let me guide you through the applications and school selections and, doing those mock interviews. That's a successful model that I've seen.
Yep. So we definitely work with our students through the process. And that's one of the, just bringing it back to this. One of the things that we're very blessed in Watertown. We have 5 guidance counselors for 600 students, which is one of the lowest ratios in the state. And so and that's over 4 years. So if you think about it, there's 20 or 30, juniors and 20 or 30 seniors for each of those guidance counselors. So those students are getting some pretty direct support about the whole application process. And we have been working with different companies and outside individuals to come in and help students, like mentoring through that program. But when we talk about that program that we're submitting to the MSBA, we are advocating to make sure that we have the appropriate space in our building to offer the guidance services that we know our students need to prepare them for their lives. So that's one of those big things we're advocating for. Yes.
Realizing this is a meeting about the future high school, but with some of the programs you've mentioned, like Chapter 74, some of these themes that you've arrived at, is there anything that current high school or students who will not benefit from the new high school may benefit from through all of this work that you're doing?
Yes. So one of the things, if I were our program of studies at the high school is exceedingly extensive. And one of the things that we have is Project Lead the Way, for example. I'm thinking about the engineering program. So we already have a very developed engineering curriculum that our students are offered for 4 years. So that's a nationally recognized curriculum for engineering that they're already able to take. This just takes it a little bit in a deeper level and provides them with the labs and everything else that they're going to need to take it to that farther, deeper level. But it is not something that we're holding back on. And we're even thinking about starting the medical assisting in this building prior to moving into the new high school. So we've been approved. We're not going to start next year, but potentially the following year we'll have the medical assisting program up and started. But our goal is not to stop. And it's not just about the educational program, it's also about the building. Like, we've made tons of improvements within this building because we know we're going to be here for a little while. So, we're very committed to not letting anything go. And yes, starting the programs that we want to see in our new high school. So we'll work with our staff, even beginning next year, in terms of curriculum and teaching methodology and getting ready for, when they enter into this building. We're not waiting. Yep. Yes.
Are you looking at any level of coordination or integration with some of the industries that are in town?
So we do already. We have a lot of programs, not programs, but connections with the industry in town. I'm thinking high school across the board, but I'm just thinking recently with Sasaki, for example, we have a great program with our middle school students who are over there working on designing a classroom for the new high school. So that's their project right now, but they're working with engineers to really learn what is design thinking all about. But we have our students just recently, like our biology students went to Ananta, thank you. Like, that just went right out of my head. Thank you. To meet with the people at Ananta about their profession, and then our chemistry students are going to do that as well. That's just an example, but we try really hard to make connections, and we'll continue to do so. Yes.
Sports are pretty important.
Yes.
You haven't mentioned that.
Yes. So we definitely are not going to reduce our sports program, for sure. It might be a nice segue, because I think that Scott is gonna provide you with some insight into the evaluation of potential sites. But we definitely know that, wouldn't it be great if we could offer something, you know, even here, above and beyond just a gym, meaning wherever the high school will be. So we're not going to be reducing, maybe I should have put that as one of those points that we don't need to talk about, because athletics is definitely a part of this town. But arts, performing arts, you know, visual arts, Model UN, robotics. I mean, we have major programs for our students above and beyond sports, but we definitely are, our high school is just gonna maximize and expand, not contract in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so I'm gonna hand it over to Scott, and then I'll be back. I'm not going anywhere, but if you have more questions at the end, I'm more than happy to answer them as well.
Thank you, Dr. Galson. I just want to reiterate briefly something that Chairman Ports mentioned. The high school's in the MSBA process, and one of the things that's different about being in that process and getting the grant money from the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, is they do dictate very specifically the phases that you have to go through. And we are literally in their very first phase, preliminary design program. And the reason we're talking about sites tonight in the educational program is because in that very first phase, the preliminary design program, those are the two major things that the MSBA cares about. They want a very clearly delineated educational program, which includes, by the way, every single space that will be in the building, the exact size of that space, and the exact purpose of that space. And then they want to know, not now, but in the next phase, which is right here, preferred schematic report, they want to know which options in general for the high school that the town wants to move forward and study in more detail. So they don't care about the design of a building, they don't want to see a floor plan, they want to know, are you going to build a new high school, explore building a new high school on this site? Are you going to explore building a new high school on some alternative site? Are you going to explore renovating and expanding the existing high school? They want to know sort of in narrative form what we're going to move forward and study in more detail in the next phase. And that is the preferred schematic phase, which will happen in the future between March and September of this year. And then we'll move into a schematic phase, because at the end of that phase, we'll know very specifically, the town will have decided, okay, it's going to be this project on this site. We're through exploring a lot of different options. It's going to be this project on this site. And then we'll actually move into designing a project on that particular site between October of this year and February of next year. So the only thing that we're trying to do in the current phase is get a really good sense. I've been doing this now for 29 years, and the one thing I've learned is the people who represent this town know a lot more about where things should be placed and how the town functions and how the neighborhoods are interconnected and what the culture of those neighborhoods are than we could ever know. So the whole purpose of having this kind of forum is to start a discussion and have some time to talk about those things as we plan over the next year or so. So tonight, we're going to talk about just some conceptual site options that the building committee's currently trying to narrow down and decide which ones they will take into the next phase. And so the input associated with that becomes very important. There will be a variety of different options that will be studied. We call them options under category 1, this option 1, where somehow we construct a new building, and there are a variety of different strategies that could be utilized, but somehow we construct a new high school building on the existing high school site. There's certainly some advantages to that and some disadvantages of that, and I'm going to be relatively brief as we move through these out of respect for your time. I know a lot of people plan to depart at 8, and the last thing I want to do is not leave time to respond to any questions and get any input, so I'm going to move quickly as we get started. but we can certainly come back to any of this in the form of questions. I do want to point out that when we think about the existing high school building fronting on Columbia Street, Common Street coming down between the existing high school building and the Phillips School building, parking lot at the Phillips building, the senior center located here, also utilizing some of the facilities here. The existing high school is composed of several different additions that occurred to the original 1929 building. The original 29 building was a very symmetrical building that sat right here. And then in the 50s, this addition was added, literally across a line right here, an addition was added. And in the 80s, these two additions, the current gymnasium and all of the athletic facilities, essentially, and all the support classrooms, all locker room, showers, et cetera, was added as a piece and component. And then the shop area in this corner were added in the 80s. And so when we think about building on the existing high school site, you can see that the dotted line represents the boundary of that site. There's nowhere to build unless we remove a portion of the existing building first. So the projects that we would be looking at as options there would include removing portions of the existing high school building. If we do that, one prime option would be to remove that health and physical education, that gymnasium space, and build across the rear of the site. If we propose a project like that, clearly we have to replicate those programs in some fashion. So one thing that we have talked as a possibility with the building committee about is, what if you built those facilities as a rec building on the Victory Field site, which is what you're seeing here. So this is essentially suggesting that those facilities that would have to be demolished in order to make area on the existing site would be replicated in a building on the Victory Field site, so that the students would continue to occupy the existing building during the duration of the construction of the new facility, and then certainly would move into the new facility when the existing, such that the existing building could be demolished. So it's just thinking about ways that we could in fact construct on the existing high school site. There'll be a variety of these different kinds of options for constructing on the existing high school site when we move forward into the next phase that will be studied. This is just showing what that building might look like. Again, a first phase where an academic building is constructed in the area of the existing building that would be demolished, and then a second phase after the remainder of the high school is demolished that might include an auditorium piece and a new gymnasium piece, pulling the building further off Columbia Ave or Columbia Street. Now, I said we're not studying actual buildings at this point in time. The reason we're modeling at least some semblance of a floor plan is because sometimes it just helps to evaluate them if you understand what could or could not be built on the various sites. This is showing that in 3D, again, where the finished new building at the very end of the project, after all the phases are complete, would be pulled back off of Columbia Street, could have an auditorium, a gymnasium, and a main academic building, with the existing Phillips building remaining in place as is. And this is showing what Victory Field might look like if that recreational facility was constructed there as a swing space and then ultimately turned over to the town as a community resource. And this is just giving you a sense of what that site might look like if the stadium stayed in place, the track and field stayed in place, the DPW stayed in place, but there was a rec building there that was a swing space, again, during the construction of the high school, ultimately became a permanent building for community use. And for each of these projects, we have to think about the sequence of the scheduling and whether they actually work or not, and that's gonna apply more in some of the other options. In this option, it certainly is realistic to think that if we started a recreational building project on Victory Field between 2021 and 2022, that by the time we got ready to start construction of the new high school in 2022, that swing space would be available. We know that the new high school will take approximately 2 years as a first phase, and then it would take an additional year as a second phase in that kind of conceptual project that I just described. We want to make sure that we're looking at the cost magnitude of that option. This is not a cost estimate. It's just intended to be able to compare across the various options in terms of dollar magnitude, how they stack up against one another. We don't have any detailed design plans, so it's sort of an order of magnitude cost, but we need to think about impacts like what it would cost to do that recreational building that, for the swing space that I described earlier. And so we need to be including those kind of cost impacts in any kind of conceptual analysis of a potential option. We're also going to be evaluating the use of the existing high school site in conjunction with the Phillips School Administration site, because that's an opportunity for us to get some swing space or some relief as well. So, for example, this particular option suggests that that space that I was describing earlier, the gymnasium, locker room, showers, PE spaces, when those are before those are demolished to allow room to construct a new building or a new facility, there would be a new facility constructed on the Phillips site that would accommodate all of those programs. So a new gymnasium, a new council on aging facility, all of the health and fitness programs would be designed across the street so that that portion of the building along the rear of the existing high school site could be demolished to make room for the construction of a new high school site. So there'll be a variety of different options that we'll likely study in the next phase that will involve utilizing the Phillips site in conjunction with the existing high school site to very much create a campus environment. And we've talked about bridging over the street in that instance in order to have safe access between the two buildings, but that will be one kind of option that will likely get studied in more detail in the next phase of the project. This is showing what that might look like, where by doing that, we don't have to displace as much of the existing high school site, and we can have more green space, for example, pull the building further off Columbia Street. We could consolidate and reorganize all those program components of the Council on Aging, a new gymnasium, fitness facility. There could even be some sharing of those resources. We did a project very similar to this at Plymouth North High School, where they built a new senior center in conjunction with their new high school. There's a lot of synergy between those two groups. So anything's possible, and it's something that we likely will be continuing to look at in the next phase. This is just showing what that might feel like from a massing standpoint. Columbia Street, Common Street, the bridge across to the gym and Council on Aging building, and then the academic building with the auditorium, just to give you a sense of the amount of the site area that might get displaced and might, in fact, might be made available, additional green space that might be made available as a result of this kind of option. And again, we have to look at schedule on any project like this. This one requires us would require the town to pull the trigger on that new building across the street to construct that kind of facility. So before the high school project could start, we would spend the first year, starting in 2022, constructing that building that I described on the Phillips site, such that we would be able to demolish a portion of the existing high school and start construction on the new high school in 2023. So you can see that this kind of project would add an additional year to the overall duration. Again, it's something we have to be thinking about in terms of looking at that kind of option. We could also renovate the existing senior center and just do some modifications to it and connect it to a new building. That may be something that we'd look at as part of this kind of option where we're thinking about utilizing both the Phillips administration site and the existing high school site. We have to think about order of magnitude cost on those kinds of options. And then one option that essentially we've already been able to take off the table for all practical purposes is the idea of constructing a new high school just in the area of the existing Department of Public Works. So this particular option, if you look at what we refer to as the Victory Field and the Department of Public Works area collectively, we often talk about it as three parcels, if you will. The area specifically occupied by the Department of Public Works, the area occupied by the stadium and the baseball field, and then the area occupied by the track and field and the tennis courts. So we sort of see them as we talk about them as three distinct areas. In this particular exercise, we were considering, is it possible to construct a new high school just in the area of the Department of Public Works? Well, one problem with that is this site area is only about 3.3 acres, where even the existing high school site is 4.2 acres. So it's a relatively small parcel. As we began to study what we could do there with a new academic building, it was obvious we wouldn't be able to get circulation around it. We wouldn't be able to get very much parking. It would really restrict our ability to organize the building to support the educational program that Dr. Galson was describing. It felt compressed in that area, but most of all, we realized that a project like the relocation of the existing DPW is so complex and requires so much study that it really would have needed to be underway a year ago, 2 years ago, to have a chance at success on a relocation there. And it's the kind of thing that MSBA, as your grant partner, does not like to see, because they don't want any project to be contingent, any high school project, to be contingent on success of being able to move another facility. We also see that there's a really significant cost impact to the tune of sort of $40 to $55 million to move that facility. And if, in fact, you decided to take that pathway, it was obvious to us that it's going to take the high school off its current track, and it's highly likely that the MSBA grant program would no longer be available if you can't meet the timeline to sequentially move through the process and execute the high school project. The MSBA is very sensitive to the fact that there are numerous cities and towns waiting for grants for projects that have been waiting for years. And so if your project were to go on hold to address something like moving a key facility like the DPW, they would pull you out of that program and you have to re-enter again. So there are a lot of, the risks were too high, the costs were too high, and just the scheduling and complications associated with that made that particular option seem very unattractive. As a result of studying that option, we were asked by the building committee, and we're continuing to take a look at a variety of these things. One thing I should have mentioned is on the Phillips administration site combined with the existing high school site, we've already been asked by the building committee to just take a look at what would happen if you flipped those two things, and if it's possible to do that academic building on the Phillips site and then do the athletic and senior center on the current existing high school site. Now, in some ways, we, that may not be possible because the Phillips site is so much smaller than the existing high school site, but it's something we're looking at. And then the building committee also asked us to take a look at what would happen if a new high school facility was constructed on the Victory Field site, and I mean that literally the track and field area, and the DPW stayed in place undisturbed. So we're taking a look at what that impact would be. It means that, as you can see here, DPW would be preserved in that scenario. The existing stadium would need to be converted to a multi-purpose stadium with a track, because a track will not fit on the existing high school site, on this site that we're standing on today. So we would need to do a stadium with a track and field in the location of the current stadium, and then that would leave the Victory Field area with the track and field as an area, buildable area for a new high school. That obviously still displaces a field area, so we've got to be thinking about how we do that. We got to be thinking about, or how we deal with that. We got to be thinking about the schedule. Now, certainly that kind of project would probably be the most immediate start without any enabling projects, because we're taking over an area that's not occupied by any building. It has other impacts, but this is just showing what that scheduling impact would be on that kind of project. And then we have a slide to show at the existing high school site, this Phillips Administration Building, just to give you a sense of scale, what a soccer field looks like laid out on that site, along with a basketball court. Because one of the things we'll need to do is try to replicate any resources that we displace from the current Victory Field site in any of these options. The last thing we want to do is have any net loss of any field space, any recreation space, any green space. We have to consider that as part of this analysis. And then showing that same area if we did attempted to place the baseball field that again would be displaced as a result of the stadium being constructed on the Victory Field site, and what that would look like on the existing high school site. That's really quick movement through all of those options, I know, but we really want to make absolutely certain that we've got time to hear what everyone has to say, to answer any questions, to respond to any ideas. So we can go back to any of these and talk in as much detail as you want as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ports.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. So I think we're open for questions now, and I'm going to walk around with a microphone because this is on cable, and I think they need the microphone to capture the questions. But you can ask Scott or Dr. Galston or Tim from the OPM questions that you might have.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sure, right, but where do you want me to go?
Just move more in the center, John, move more in the center so you can.
Okay. Here.
Yeah, my name is Russ Arico, and I have another proposal here to put on the table. Let's make every effort to build the new high school in the same area, utilizing the land of the old Phillips School and the old cemetery. Exhume and relocate the remains of those buried there. All that is left is bones, plus air rights between the two buildings to build a walkway and offices on both sides. Now, for those who object to this, every time you use your tap water or take a shower, that water traveled over former graveyards. To create the Quabbin Reservoir, if anyone that didn't know this, it was built in the 1930s. 4 towns had to be disincorporated and flooded. This includes relocating remains of those in several graveyards. This is a viable option. All we need is the courage to do it. All other options will create more problems and long-term costs. So I would like to see this put on the table and part of the research of sites. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have a comment? Either of you? Well, I don't know. It's an idea. It's an idea. Other questions, comments?
You know, we spent a lot of time last year, can you hear me? About redoing Victory Field. So I think a lot of people here are kind of astonished that it's even being considered to use Victory Field for a school. I thought that was all finished.
Kenny, do you want to actually speak to that? Well, you were chair of the committee that looked at it.
Thank you, John. Thank you for that. So I will just say, yes, that's a great question. Why are we considering Victory Field when we just built a new football stadium? and plan on renovating the track. And the short answer is the MSBA process requires us to examine every municipally owned parcel that is big enough to fit a high school. It is part of the process. We looked at, for example, Moxley Field next to the middle school, and after looking at that, we crossed it off the list because it really wasn't going to fit there. I would just say that, you know, our job, and I'm on the school building committee, and along with Mr. Ports, but our job is to examine everything and to do a fair job to the citizens and taxpayers of this town. We have to consider every option, no matter how crazy it may seem, even if we just end up crossing it off the list because it doesn't make sense. So I ask people, don't be afraid because we've considered something, but understand our job is to weigh the pros and cons of what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So we are all trying to keep an open mind about this, but every site has positives and negatives, and at the end of the day, we're going to have to weigh those and pick the one that's the best choice for Watertown.
I just hope that before you pick a site, you analyze the parking and the traffic flow, because that certainly should be a factor in deciding between one site and another. So I would not want to have the site picked and then parking capacity and traffic flow be an afterthought.
John, I would just add to that when, after this phase, when the sites that the town wants to study in more detail are identified, in the next phase, there would have to be a traffic analysis and a lot more detailed site study done for parking, circulation, et cetera, at any of the sites that remain on the table. It's one of the requirements, actually, from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. It absolutely would have to be done.
Regarding the Victory Field site, this choice seems to be a little rather drastic and ill-informed. I would point out that Victory Field is the town park and the town playground, and to turn this over to the school would disenfranchise the town. No, it's used, besides its use of both portions of Victory Field for the school teams and the school athletics and recreation committee, recreation department activities, and other activities that are authorized by the town recreation department, and for permit holders from outside of town to use the area. Besides those things, 15,000 residents of Watertown come there every year to the Oval for recreation, for informal and casual recreation. I know because I spent 2 years counting them there. And that's a lot of people to disenfranchise. Are 15,000 people going to have to go up to the Burlington Mall and play on the pavement there? It's probably the most used, I'm sure it's the most used recreational area of the town. It has been for many, many years. And I'd hate to see it go.
Speak to, I mean, in fact, they would be replaced with the area here, and that's.
Yeah, I mean, the goal with that particular option would be to with any option would be to replicate that green space in some other area. So you could certainly demonstrate that some of that would be replicated, but I would emphasize what the counselor said in that the MSBA, when we submit all of our work from this particular phase, is going to say, what are the parcels you considered and why did you rule them out? And what are the pieces of town-owned land that would have accommodated this school and why did you rule them out? And so it's hugely important when we hold this kind of forum that you let us know about those kind of things. And if people are feeling that way and you have ideas about it, it's important to tell us, because that's what we're here for, because we need to report back to them that that we did sort of leave no stone left unturned. And 100 people came out and said to us, you know, here's the history and here's the pieces that are important to us, and we don't want this moved, or we don't want the, you know, another piece replicated. But I would say, just as Chairman Ports pointed out, the goal with any of these projects would be to make sure there's no net loss of space, but certainly it would be a movement of space.
I was under the impression that you did study some other sites. Is it possible you could list quickly what they were and why they were rejected?
There are no, this will come as no surprise to you, there are no significantly sized available parcels in the town that aren't already parks or recreational space or green space. One of the things that we did in our analysis is we took a look at the entire town and how the green space is kind of nicely balanced out, which is what you want. And we're very sensitive to the fact that we have to be careful about displacing it from one specific area or another. It was pointed out earlier that Moxley Field came up as a possible site. There were some size restrictions there, but it also happened to be an area where you've got, an area of the town where you've got very limited green space specifically. So to completely remove the only available green space there didn't seem to make sense. And more overriding factor was the limitation in the parcel size and the resources there. But besides that, there are no obvious available sites. You know, in an ideal world, you would want something at least the size of the current high school site, 4.2 acres as a minimum. And so there are no known identified parcels other than the ones that we have mentioned.
Did you investigate commercial property like the Watertown Ma?
You know, the interesting thing about Watertown, and ultimately, you know, it takes an enormous amount of time for a city or town to procure a property like that, years. And what we saw here in Watertown is even the parcels that have come up in the last 5 years commercially have a shocking value. And so the amount of dollars per acre that are being paid right now for these 4, 5, 6, 7 acre parcels is unlike anything that we've ever seen or experienced. And it's because there's so limited site area. So I think that it becomes a question of if a parcel was even available, would it be in any way at all affordable? It's a question we certainly can't answer, but there's nothing readily available on the market that we thought was a good idea. And I know that the town has been looking for a long time to buy property and has reported back to us that none of those efforts became successful. So.
Hi, my name is Jocelyn Tager. I'm a resident of Watertown. I have 4 points I want to make. The first, I want to thank you, Dr. Galston, for your beautiful explanation and hope for the future of the present and future of our students. You started that yesterday at the Unity Breakfast, and you certainly expanded on it today, so I thank you. Our students won't have a future if our high school isn't built with zero net energy. And that wasn't even mentioned or on the goal sheet today. For those of you not knowing, zero net energy means that our school will produce as much energy as it uses and it won't have fossil fuels in it. Okay, we can do that with a highly conserving envelope, with high efficiency mechanics, and with energy protection either through solar or wind. It's unlikely we will have a wind turbine on our school, but it's a possibility, and we can certainly do it with solar. So our students won't have a future if we don't start building this way. And I think more importantly, as federal and state regulations change, we may be asked to retrofit. So it's better for us to put the money into this sort of building upfront so that we, over the life of the building, our costs are reduced, and also if we have to retrofit, we won't have to. So that's,
Can I just say something? I know you have 4 points, but
yeah,
please
that was
stop at
the
the first one.
second.
That was the second one.
The first was was
so-
thanking you.
Not, so I said there's 4 non-negotiables, meaning, you know, I talked about safety, I talked about technology, I talked about community use, and the 4th one is sustainability. And I'm sorry I didn't state that out loud. That's one of those things that we didn't talk about in the educational program because those are the extraneous, that's not the right word, but those are the things that will happen no matter what. And one of the things, I don't know if you caught in the slide about the engineering technology program, one of the strands in there is sustainable engineering. So, you know, we would definitely want our building to be a teacher around how that is engineered and part of that program. So I should have pointed that out too, so.
Thank you.
Yes, I'll go back for.
Okay,
point
and
3.
then my third point is that when our elementary schools when that process began, sustainability and zero net energy were not on the goal sheet anywhere. They are now, okay? But our school committee, building committee was selected not with that as a goal. We have many people, many residents who are architects and consultants and build that way. And we also, you've talked about the fact that we will have to work with the MSBA, and they'll be our partner. And we have, I can think of 2 members, residents who have taken schools through this, not just Watertown, but other school systems. And I would like to see some of these people selected and appointed to our school building committee for our high school. I do understand that you would want some institutional continuity so that some of the people from the elementary school would be on the high school building committee, but I also think that we residents are deserving of people who are knowledgeable in these fields. And the last thing I want to talk about is wherever this school is sited, and I don't know where it will be sited, I want to second Kathy's point about traffic. I think if the school is sited on its current site, the entrance needs to be on Common, as does the drop-off, pickup, parking, etc. It seems wrong to me to funnel that traffic through the sweet residential neighborhood that is Columbia, Orchard, Bellevue, Robbins, Barnard, Russell, Garfield, and Bailey. And some of the plans that I looked at did show traffic being funneled through these neighborhoods. It's not okay. It's simply, it's not right that sweet residential neighborhoods get destroyed or become thoroughfares or parking lots. And the same is true if it gets moved to the Victory Field site, that those on Marion, Marshall, et cetera, I don't know the names of all the streets, that no parking gets or traffic gets funneled through those sites. And last, I want to thank all of you for showing up. Thank you.
John, just a couple things. One of the things, in our first community forum on the high school, Jolly, what we did, and yeah, I should have mentioned in our first forum on the high school, the building committee insisted that we put right out front the importance of sustainability. So we did have slides that talked about the high school would need to be net zero, minimum of LEED Gold, and some of those things in our first forum. We left those out of here in the interest of brevity, but they have clearly identified that as a goal, which they did for the 2 new elementary schools as well. Well, I think that I think that was a fantastic journey in that, for those of you who don't know, at one point in time, the Cuniff and the Hosmer elementary schools were just going to be renovation additions. And the building committee ultimately felt like that was too much of a compromise and that the town deserved more. So there was a transition in January of last year. Yeah, where they decided that the town wanted more than that, and so those projects transitioned to new school projects, and at the same time, that made those goals of net zero and LEED Gold possible. So I think that the town should pat themselves on the back for that, and the building committee should, and everybody should be proud of kind of that. That was a real transitional point for the elementary schools, in my opinion.
As a parent who has a child that would enter in 2021, the high school, and graduate in 2025, I am concerned about the impact on the students during the time of the construction, and nobody in the meeting spoke about that. So I'd love to hear a plan for what students who would attend during these phases would have to, how it would impact their environment and their education.
Sure. For any of those projects that, for any of the options that involve building on the existing high school site, we refer to that as phased occupied construction. And the reason we're not talking in detail about it now is it takes super detailed and careful analysis to be able to report on exactly how we would phase those projects while portions of the building are being occupied. And in those instances, though, education and preserving the environment for those students become the highest priority. And that's why we said in that very first option, if you're going to take anything away, you have to build them a brand new facility that replicates that before you take it away. And we have had a lot of real, you would think, oh, you know, construction is going on, it's going to be disruptive, but we've had a lot of really successful projects where we constructed a new high school directly adjacent to the existing high school. And sometimes there are programs that are started in the high school that are about construction and engineering and architecture, and we integrate the two things together so that those students have those opportunities. Over the years, I've seen students that occupied the high school during the time of phased occupied construction of a new high school that eventually became architects and engineers. So I've seen a lot of I've seen the video production programs decide to prepare an entire movie about the development of the new high school. Whitman-Hanson Regional High School, they won a national award as a result of the documentary that the students there produced in video production on the construction of the new high school. So a lot of really good success stories. And at the end of the day, if that's the option the town chooses, there are a handful of things that we know. We know it's going to be complicated, but we know that education is going to be the priority, and we know that there can be a successful solution that we would definitely have to talk about in detail if that ends up being one of the options that we keep pushing down the field. But there are some good success stories out there with regard to projects that were, I mean, Somerset Berkeley High School was done that way. Plymouth North and South were done that way. Norwood High School was done that way. There's some good success stories out there on how it can be done, and we've been involved in a lot of them. But safety, security, noise, separation of students from construction, all those are things that we would be talking about if we're going to consider that kind of option.
Quick follow-up. Specifically, which of the options that you presented has the least amount of impact, which I think is Victory Field, and
Sure.
versus the other options, which of those is most impactful for 700 and some change at a time, plus 3 or 4 new classes coming in, 1,600 students over 4 years? Which one is the impact that is hardest to do?
Building on the existing high school site is, I mean, that's pretty obvious. So there's no, but what the town has to weigh, what the building committee has to weigh, and I'm glad it's their job and not ours, is you know, yes, there is an impact. How can that be mitigated? And then if you build on Victory Field, what is that impact, and how does that look 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, and weigh, you know, what those impacts are, and how, you know, what the long-term goal is, and can they be mitigated in the short term? And it's a complicated process.
My name is Elodia Thomas. I have lived here for 45 years, have been following the tracking of various school proposals since 2014. I spent my summer of 2016 attending multiple school meetings about various sites and have attended every single meeting for the school building committee except when I was out of the country for a couple of weeks. I'm glad to see everybody's here now, but you are missing a huge amount of information if you're not regularly following these meetings. It all comes back to this site. This is where the high school should go, period. We've heard it again and again. We have the opportunity to expand to the Phillips site and do something unusual and better for our community, for the senior population in town, because the senior center is squeezed terribly on that site. But the idea that we would take conservation land away, which is part of Victory Field, to move a high school on it is absolutely outrageous to me. I'm chair of the Community Preservation Committee. Watertown has 3.7 acres per 1,000 people of open space. The standard is 10 acres per 1,000. What are we doing to now take this little green space away? To blithely think we can move a baseball field somewhere else in town. Wake up, folks. Look around the town. There is no possibility for that. To again just say, we'll move this here and we'll take the DPW out. Well, that's off the table completely. But please, there's not an unlimited pocketbook in Watertown. People will not vote for things that they think are excessive. We also have to look at what the MSBA will pay for. They don't pay for land acquisition. Let's put that up front. For those that wonder about the Watertown Mall, I know a developer that offered $70 million for that property and was turned down. So that's what property is going for in Watertown. It's expensive. So we have to spend our money wisely. We have to remember that we are a suburban city, that everybody in this town counts. My slogan on every email I send out to do with Watertown is we are all Watertown. We are not a siloed community. We have to stop acting like that. We all count. And I am simply, if you can hear it in my voice, outraged to think that we would move the high school so easily to Victory Field. I guarantee you that this override will not pass with that attitude in this community. Less than 20% of the families, we have less than 20% of families have school children in our schools. And when you really start to look at the numbers, you'll be surprised about how many people, once they hit the high school now, right now, try to send their kids to private school. We have to wake up, do the right thing by our entire community. That's all I have to say right now. There's a gentleman to my left that would like the microphone, so I'm going to pass it over.
Thank you. My name is Tony Palillo, and just a couple of points I want to make is one is that as you go through the options here, I served on the school committee when we did the last renovation of the schools, and I served on the Building the Future committee back then. And one of the things we did, and we were worried about the amount of money that we were going to have to propose for the override, is that we ended up cutting back and scrimping. And if you look at some of the buildings today that in the elementary school and the middle school, you can see that that was a mistake. And if we do it, we should do it right and make sure we build this thing that it lasts for a long time and that it takes care of all the needs that the superintendent proposed. So I would ask that you don't, make sure you're reasonable with your costs, because we do probably have to present it to the town and get an override, and we want to be reasonable with it. But please make sure you do it right, and I think you're doing it the right way, the way you propose it from an educational standpoint. Second is I want to reiterate what Jolly mentioned about the parking and the traffic. I mean, one of the things we've been dealing with for years, if you served on the school committee, is the parking and the traffic at the high school and some of the other schools. I would ask you, as you design this project and as you come to do it, please start to consider that parking and traffic now and make it part of the design. And some of the ideas that Jolly brought up are some good ideas that we had talked about before about changing the whole configuration of Common Street as far as how people drive in and out of there so the traffic flows a little bit better. But try to get that up front, because what happens as you start to build these things, as from experience we've done with some of the other schools, is that you forget about that, and then it ends up becoming a real problem. And the parking within this area here is always been a real difficult part, and Mr. Ports will say that he lives in Robbins Road also, so it's very difficult for all the neighbors here. So we should really start to consider that up front and look at other alternatives for the parking too. And try, I know it's a lot of it's the parking is the teachers parking, and where they their staff's a big part of the parking here, and they need a place. But also students, we should probably try to help students find a way to get to the school other than drive. So there are some things we should start to consider up front, I think. So just a couple of points I wanted to make.
Also, I just want to say I went to the MSBA meetings downtown. There was one other resident there besides me, Jimmy Mello. We saw the presentations from 8 architectural firms that then were narrowed down to 3, which Scott finally was decided to be the best plan for our school. All of these architectural firms pointed back to this location as the best site for the high school. So grab onto that. 2, blue bikes are coming into town. We need to encourage our kids to use bicycles, to walk. All this car business, when they have to go from here to Victory Field, is crazy. This is on the bus line. We should get a jitney service in this town so we can get everybody around the community, be it seniors or kids. There's a lot to do to be forward-thinking in this town, but let's not compromise this tiny piece of green space that is so important to so many in this community. Thank you, John.
So we're coming up right close to 8 o'clock. One final question, if you have one.
Well, as people are talking about parking, I was wondering, are you looking at any underground parking for the teachers, for instance?
Yeah, one of the interesting things about, and we're not designing yet, but as the gentleman mentioned, we have to be thinking about these things ahead of time. And the interesting thing about this current high school site is there's about 10 feet of grade change between Columbia and the back edge of the site along the cemetery. So it would potentially make an ideal site to do that underground level parking in that change and tie the main floor of the building into the Columbia Street elevation, if you will, and tuck an underground parking area that wouldn't have to be subsurface where you literally excavate into the ground, but would be underneath the building. And you could get a significant amount of parking on the site with that kind of strategy. So those are some of the things we're thinking about, not just with this site, but with any site. How do we get the maximum amount of parking without taking green space?
One last question.
Thanks, John. My name's Bill Oates, also a former member of the school committee here in Watertown. And maybe this is a good wrap-up question. Could you explain to us, it looks now as though you're down to 3 options. I didn't hear any discussions about renovation of this building, so I'm assuming that's now off the table?
No, I should have explained. We talked about that a little bit in the first forum, but renovation addition of this building has to be studied in the next phase. The MSBA will require that.
Okay.
Based on our experience and what we already know about this building, we know that it'll prove ultimately that this building could never be reorganized to represent a modern school. There are too many limitations structurally, too many limitations in the structural bays and the way everything's set up. And we also know that the renovation addition cost of this building, again, just from experience, would be even more than constructing a brand new building on the site. But we will have to evaluate renovation addition on this site. Now, other than that, it's really just studying variations on the Phillips combined with the high school site and variations on the existing high school site, renovation addition on the high school site, and then any other sites that the building committee continues to leave on the table.
I have been in this town so long. I was in this building when it was even smaller, and we had the 3 grades of high school, over 1,200 students in this building without the 1980s addition. So you wonder, and you see the potential, so it's not a size issue, probably to your point, a structural issue on whether you can do the 21st century things that the superintendent talked about here. But could you explain, just in terms of the process, to Elodia's point, at what points do we go and eliminate options, agree on what the main option is, get to the point where potentially it's agreed to by the building committee, needs to go for a public vote? What does, even at a high level, just so the folks that are engaged don't miss important points of this discussion? Thank you.
Sure, it's a super good question. So at the end of February, the building committee will have to establish the options that are going to move forward into the next phase. And then between March and September of this year, we'll be looking in more detail. Oh, what's happening?
Yeah, it makes
It looks good here.
Huh. That is very strange.
There you go.
There we go. Sorry about that. I have no explanation. So this is that time period where the building committee could potentially take any one of the options that we're talking about, except for renovation addition of the existing high school. MSBA will require that to go to the next phase. But they could take any one of the options off the table. And then in the next phase, between March and September, they'll be holding forums like this and building committee meetings, often twice a month and more, to talk about our analysis of those various options, because in September of 2020, that's a very critical time. That's when the building committee decides what kind of project is it and what site is it on. And there's no turning back on these decisions. The MSBA will not allow you to revisit again. You could potentially get pulled out of the program. So these are really key decision points. So at September 2020, the building committee will have to finalize the option that's being studied. Then it'll move forward into schematic design, and we'll develop the design in enough detail that you'll be able to see what it's going to look like, feel like, photorealistic renderings of the building, the site, enough design information that we could do very detailed cost on it and be confident that that is in fact the cost of the project. And then at that point in time, the town will have to make a decision, town-wide decision on voting the funding approval. So that will occur in the spring. We'll essentially submit the design to the MSBA to make sure they approve it. And then sometime subsequent to that, you have 120 days, I believe, to hold a funding vote, which would be the debt exclusion vote town-wide for funding the project.
With your patience, one more question.
Hi, my name's Ann Fitzpatrick, and I live. Oh,
That's not a microphone for people won't hear
so
that.
my name's Ann Fitzpatrick. I live off Orchard Street, and I'm shocked that Victory Field is being considered. Having lived through Victory Field being built and Victory Field Phase 2 being fought, and the new Victory Field committee being put together, and them spending a year deciding how we can use that land, I'm shocked that all of a sudden we're just pulling all of that and saying, no, we're going to maybe move the high school over there. I'm happy to hear that the moving DPW and delaying the project for an extended period and spending an additional $60 million, is something that we're really not considering. But to take away conservation land, to take away the green space that has existed, it's my understanding that used to be a celery field, 80 years ago when my father grew up here. It's shocking and it's appalling, and I think it's asinine. And so for the folks, I understand that you have to do your due diligence and that you have to be able to tell the granting organization that you looked into every option and that there was pushback from the town. So I'm here to tell you there will definitely be enormous pushback if you try to build it on Victory Field's open space. Vinny knows this. I've told him.
Well, I think there's pushback from both, and I think Jolly said it best. Wherever it ends up, all these things have to be taken into consideration. It's a burden right now for people who live in the current high school. That's right.
It is, but it's where it is.
All right, we're going to wrap up here.
So it is, but I think that, we've been going through this process for several years, knowing that we needed to do something, and this site makes the most sense. And, you know, Victory Field is, you know, something that should not be taken away, and that's really the point that I'm here to make.
I want to close by thanking everybody for coming, encouraging you to stay engaged, which I think certainly people will. There is a building committee meeting. We meet 2 or 3 times a month at this point because we're also dealing with the elementary school. But there's a building committee on the 29th of January in Town Hall, 6 o'clock. So, you know, definitely stay engaged. There will be another community forum in 2 to 3 months, I believe. If you signed up on that sheet, we'll make sure you hear about it.
John, would you just tell everyone who's on the building committee?
So the building committee members, raise your hand. Some of them are here. There are 12 people on the building committee. Yeah, I'm one of them. And there's a list on the website. Building the Future on the Watertown Public School website. Building for the Future. There's a link there at the top. You navigate down and you can find more information.
John,